Good morning. I hope you have your cups of coffee ready, your energy drink, whatever is necessary. We don't usually do it this early, but we don't usually get decommitments at 10 o'clock at night either. So we obviously have to do what we have to do. Jack Pilgrim here with Jacob Polachek and Zach Gagan as Kentucky. We're talking all about the additions that Kentucky is racking up. We unfortunately received the news late last night that four-star point guard, incoming freshman Acaden Lewis, has decided to decommit from the University of Kentucky. He signed with the Wildcats back in November and decided late last night that it is time to reopen his recruitment. Originally picked the Cats over UConn and Duke, with UNC as kind of that dark horse team back in the day. Now he will have his choice of where he wants to attend here in the next couple of weeks and before arriving on campus here in June, but it will not be in Lexington. Jacob, I know you have some close relationships with folks close to Acaden. Just how do you think we got to this point?
Yeah, so Acaden and his people, they all knew that Kentucky was likely to bring in a point guard from the portal this offseason. When Donovan Dent was an option, that was someone that got them really excited. But then you bring in a guy like Jalen Lowe, and it's not that Jalen Lowe is a bad point guard or anything. It's just the fact that he is a guy with multiple years of eligibility that's probably going to demand 30 minutes a night. That doesn't exactly give a guy like Acaden Lewis a lot of playing time right off the bat. So I think a lot of it is just a playing time thing more than anything at all.
Zach, I don't love hearing that because, if you just watch how this season unfolded, backup point guard spot was a pretty important role for Mark Pope. He basically runs a glorified platoon system where everybody in the rotation is going to be playing 17 to 25 minutes a game. Nobody is going to be playing 30 minutes a game. I mean, we kind of got into it with Pope a couple times throughout the year going, why is Amari only averaging 23, 24, 25 minutes a game? And every time he responded, that's not how we do things. So I'm just struggling to kind of come to grasp with this, like how a guy who is clearly going to have a really valuable role in this system, in this offense, with so much upside down the road. And honestly, like, who's to say that Acaden wouldn't have beaten Jalen Lowe for the starting point guard spot? Like, it's a competition. They arrive in June. And, I don't think that Mark Pope is promising, hey, here's your starter, here's your, we don't promise positions and roles around here. I don't know. I'm struggling with this one a little bit, knowing just how talented Acaden was and what the long-term future looked like for him. I don't know. I personally thought he had a role here in Lexington.
Well, first and foremost, it just kind of kills our Lexington lefties dream. I mean, we still got the two guys on there, but you needed the trio to kind of complete the trifecta back there. So that stinks a little bit, but it also stinks just because Acaden's a really good player. He was kind of the less talked about of the three incoming freshmen, but not, he's not the Kentucky kid, so that's probably part of it. But Acaden was really good. He had a little bit of an injury last year, I think, as well. So that maybe just kind of caused him to fall out of the limelight, if you will. But he's a really good player. He was probably going to end up playing 15-ish minutes a game. It felt like 15 to 20 minutes a game anyways. So like you were saying, Jack, where, he's probably going to be on the court anyways. Maybe he's just a guy that wanted to play 30 minutes a game. And that's something that, kind of all hit them at the same time, where they're like, hey, they're going after they got Jalen Lowe. You've got Colin Chandler, who's going to want to try and take a leap. I'm just looking at the roster right now. I mean, Jasper Johnson, is he going to play? I guess the on-ball, off-ball stuff doesn't matter as much in Pope's offense, but so there are dudes back there, and the backcourt was a little bit crowded. The front court definitely had not a lot less depth than the backcourt did, but yeah, just losing him in general it stinks, because you thought he was going to be a multi-year guy who could grow and develop under Pope, and maybe by year two or even year three or even year two be like the guy, the starting guy. So that definitely stinks. But as a lot of people like to say, there are no coincidences in recruiting. Just as Kentucky starts to heat up, all this talk with Lamar Wilkerson, a backcourt player. Not exactly the same mold as Acaden. Wilkerson's more of a scoring type 2 guy, like taller, 6'4", shoots the hell out of the ball. As he's starting to, chime up all these visits, he's visiting Kentucky this weekend. You have another backcourt player decommit. I don't know if there's any of those things are related or not. I just know that we've been doing this for long enough that usually when one thing happens, there's connections somewhere out there. So it'll be interesting to see how Pope now approaches replacing Acaden Lewis, because you've got basically 2. You could even maybe have 3 roster spots left that he has now to play with throughout the rest of the whole offseason, essentially.
Yeah, Jacob, it's a great point because we went into this last week or so after getting Jaden Quainton's commitment and said, hey, there's one more spot to fill, assuming there are no unexpected departures in terms of outgoing portal targets. And again, you can never be too sure in the portal season. That doesn't close for another 11 days. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. But we kind of went into this saying, hey, there's one more guard spot, one more sharpshooting wing spot. Whoever wants it, you can go on and take it. Lamar Wilkerson emerging as that guy, as Wesley Yates, as we had talked about for several shows now, that trending toward Washington is that kind of path started going down that direction. Kentucky pivots and kind of starts pushing its chips in on Lamar Wilkerson. Where do things stand there? Is this a sign that Kentucky is trending? As I have a baby walking in set to say hello to us and meet
Sweet.
the Rapid Reaction crew. But is that a sign, something to keep an eye on? Does that mean that Kentucky is in a solid landing spot for Lamar Wilkerson?
Well, first off, you mentioned your baby. Everyone is asking me about the dog. The dog is right
let's
under
get a dog
me right
appearance. Oh, we got a baby appearance.
now. There we go. We
goodness.
got a baby. But yeah, Lamar Wilkerson, I like where Kentucky stands right now. Obviously, heading into visits, the 2 schools that you seem to be hearing about the most are Kentucky and Indiana, who are getting the first 2 visits. And then you got Auburn and Ole Miss, who are in kind of a different tier. But if he gets past those Indiana and Kentucky visits and makes it to Auburn and Ole Miss, maybe those schools will gain some momentum. But right now, I like where Kentucky stands. Like you said, there are no coincidences in recruiting. Losing Acaden Lewis, it just means that they may think that the backcourt's going to get a little more crowded, and Lamar Wilkerson would certainly make that crowded with a really good fit, really good player. We'll see what happens on visits. Things can always change, but I like where Kentucky stands heading into things.
Now, Zach, does this open the door for? Hey, what's up, little buddy? Does this open the door for? I gotta get his face in there. There we go. Does this open the door for Pope now pivoting to just go for a backup point guard spot? Like, is there now an Acaden Lewis replacement out there that you have your eyes on, or is this a Lamar Wilkerson will wrap things up and then we'll see what happens in the front court?
This feels like the Jaden Quainton's interview on KSR with the baby cooing in the background, and we got Billy now. This is the Rapid Reaction version, but yeah, it will be interesting to see how Pope elects to use, because he's basically got 2 more roster spots he can fill. Obviously, one is going to be some sort of sharpshooting guard. That's kind of what it's been trending for like a week now. Whether that ends up being Wilkerson or someone new that pops up in the portal, I guess is yet to be determined. But I think it'll be interesting to see if now he really tries to go all in on, someone like the Fulgaris kid from Robert Morris from Spain. What was it again, Jack? The octopus? How do you say it?
El Pulpo.
There you go. Yeah. So if they can, maybe that's now an option. We had the whole Brandon Garrison stuff. Like, is he coming back? Is he not? I've gone on record saying I want him to come back. I think most of us in this group agree with that we'd like to have him back at Kentucky. So you've kind of got your 4 man front court rotation. Does Pope want to mess with that and add in another guy like Fulgaris, or does he kind of focus heavy on the backcourt, go for a sharpshooting guy, and then maybe find like some sort of developmental piece, like maybe go back into the high school ranks and look for a point guard, a guy that is going to come in being like, all right, I'm probably not going to play this year, but a year or 2 from now, Pope can put me in a position to thrive. I know that that's kind of a hard thing to pitch in the transfer portal era. So it'll be interesting to see how he actually goes about it. But he's got more options now. Obviously they want to get a guard, but I think that last spot now, after you fill that role, you can be even more creative now with it than he would have been this time yesterday.
Yeah, and I will say, if you're a subscriber to KSR Plus, you're kind of getting a whole bunch of random information I don't think anybody bargained for over the last 24 hours. But among a lot of things that are going on over there right now, there was an update on Brandon Garrison that, the outside feelers definitely getting louder and louder about Brandon Garrison potentially hitting the portal. Other teams that could be of interest. There are named schools that do have interest. I'm hoping my kid doesn't hit my extension cord and knock us out of power.
That'd be funny.
Here, hold on. But so I, as the outside noise is kind of ramping up, on Brandon Garrison, a lot of the internal noise is trending toward a return. That there is a lot of optimism about Brandon Garrison. This is ridiculous. About what a second season of Brandon Garrison looks like in Lexington, getting a junior year out of him. There's a lot of noise that something could be brewing sooner rather than later in terms of some type of return announcement. So that's something I definitely have my eyes on. What that means for Alvaro, Jacob, that's definitely interesting to me. If you can guarantee that BG comes back, do we kind of play some musical chairs with roles and stuff and try to take both of them now that Acaden is out, or do you kind of see this as a one or the other with BG and Fulgaris?
Well, I like the idea of taking both of them, but I'm not a guy that has to distribute the minutes at all. So it's an easier thing for me to say. You get two really talented guys with high upside. One guy in BG that one guy in BG that's got multiple years of eligibility, really high upside, former McDonald's All-American, and then you get Fulgaris, who can really plug and play right away. I like the idea of having them both, but that might be a harder sell to both of them to come play alongside each other.
Zach, we talked a lot about just, national championship upside if you are able to add a Wilkerson. Well, I guess I do want to add first, if it's not Wilkerson, is there anybody else out there that has kind of jumped out to you that, obviously the hope is that you can land Wilkerson potentially as early as this weekend if he visits on Sunday. That's definitely something that Kentucky fans would love to see and kind of put a bow on this. But if not for Wilkerson, is there anybody else that you have your eye on that you'd like to potentially add as a second pivot?
I haven't really dug into deep into the transfer portal to see what other options are out there. We just kind of go off the names that we know have been contacted by Kentucky. So another name out there is Jerome Pierre. He might make actually a little bit more sense now, whereas he kind of didn't with Acaden Lewis, where Acaden was more of a guy that you want to put the ball in his hands type situation. Pierre's kind of the same way, but Pierre's probably also a guy that wants to command a bunch of minutes. So that could also probably be a hard sell. And dollars as well. Yes, I think Jacob's been talking about that as well on KS Board, that he's, high dollar guy. So, I personally would like to maybe go after another front court guy, if that's how they look at it, whether that's Fulgaris or some sort of developmental piece. But I think that his options have really expanded now with Lewis. I think we would all just rather have Acaden Lewis, because I think we all thought he was going to be really good. And with a long-term potential type guy, just a very smooth type point guard who can pass the ball really well. So just losing him is just kind of a bummer. And if you go into the high school ranks, you're probably not going to get a guy better than Acaden, at least immediately. So that would be a long-term thing. But in terms of actual options, the board has shrunk so much from where it was 10 days ago that, there's really only a handful of names left that are actually on the big board right now. But I assume that will change. It probably already has changed. It wouldn't be a surprise if Pope reached out to somebody last night, yesterday, this morning, and has already started to put feelers out for guys that are deep low on his Excel sheet of the analytics sheet that he was talking about, where he's like, all right, is he going to go find his Ainsley Almanor, his one guy ranked in the 300s of the portal? Is that something that he's going to go search for, try and find a senior veteran guy who just wants to come in and play 10, 12 minutes off the bench, be the Almanor piece off the bench? So that could be interesting, but there are options now. And I think that's kind of exciting. It's like a second wave of the offseason now.
Yeah, Jacob, I think Ainsley is the perfect example there, because I remember vividly when he committed, everybody was like, who? What? We're getting this kid over Sienna? What is Mark Pope? Is he smoking crack? What is this guy doing? And for that to end up being the perfect guy for that very specific role, I know you're probably not just going to get a name brand kid to just openly come in. You're not going to get a starting caliber point guard coming in and say, oh, I'm going to play for the love of the game at the University of Kentucky. Even if it means I'm not the starting point guard, I'm still, I'll take a lesser role just to be here. You're probably not going to get that. But if you can find the Ainsley Almanor equivalent, Jacob, of that backup point guard role, that's like, hey, we're banking on your upside, or hey, this is your last hurrah. You're coming from a no-name school looking for just one final cool opportunity to play at the University of Kentucky, knowing that your minutes are going to be restricted to backup point guard minutes. There's there's a but for every seat, and there's going to be a but for that seat. And I think Ansley is probably the perfect example of maybe time and tier 3 and 4 guys who may not be the sexiest names in real time that may end up paying off down the road, Jacob.
Yeah, I completely agree. And like just kind of throwing out darts here on some potential names. You got a guy like Xavion Lee from Princeton who Kentucky reached out to initially, but then kind of backed off once Jalen Lowe committed. I'm not sure if that would be a realistic option because obviously you still have Jalen Lowe who's going to command a lot of minutes. Another guy at the shooting guard role that Kentucky had some initial interest in that's who hasn't made a decision yet and is still on the board is Rylan Griffin from Kansas. That could be an interesting one. He's a guy that would probably demand some playing time, but I don't think would expect 30 minutes a night. You could kind of play him as you wish. And then, we talked about Pierre. I'm not sure if the ship has sailed on that one, but he would be an interesting name.
Yeah, we'll see. It's going to be obviously interesting. It does kind of, like you said, Zach, it does kind of feel good to have a second wave of like, what about this spot? What about this role? Because, we were just getting started. Exactly 1 year ago today was when Mark Pope agreed to terms with the University of Kentucky. So we were just getting the process started at this point last year. And buddy, if you go back and read those comments, they were not pretty. Like just go in like the John Rothstein comments, and they were ugly. So it's very fun to kind of look back on those comments, but like there's also something to be said about like, hey, if the roster's done, like what are we going to do for the next couple weeks? Everybody else is having their fun scrambling for roster spots. What are we going to do? So this you don't want Acaden to go, but it does make our jobs, a little bit more exciting over at least in the short term. Hopefully that the long-term result is beneficial and Pope finds the Acaden replacement sooner rather than later.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't really have anything else to add to that, honestly, Jack. That was a beautiful capper right there for the rapid reaction. So,
well, this rapid reaction is extending into a not so rapid or extended
after morning reaction.
Yeah, after morning, and it's lingering into like a longer podcast. So hey, let's just wrap this thing up. I'm sure there's going to be more news to talk about. We're having a lot of fun. This is like 4 and 6 days for us here.
6 days, yeah.
So hey, we'll just keep this momentum rolling and keep having fun with this. For Jack Pilgrim, for Jacob Polajek, for Zach Gagan, make sure you go subscribe to KSR Plus. Make sure you're subscribed right here on the KSR YouTube channel. We will see you next time.